So, BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions, and this is a video I have been wanting to do for several years at this point, but I never figured out how to address it. Hikaru Hasama was done dirty, and we're going to talk about why and what I do to fix her, because honestly, I could have done a proper video on how the women in the Metal Saga were underused, but I feel like they were used as much as they could be, even though I argue there's maybe two others that could have been done more. If you made it this far into the video, type Hikaru deserved better in the comments. But let's start at the beginning. Hikaru was introduced early onto Season 1, aka Fusion, as a cold and indifferent blader because when she was younger, she was beaten and bullied and ridiculed by other boys when she lost, and she cried a lot. Her mother, who's still in the hospital, convinced her to persevere and carry on her legacy because she also dreamed about becoming a strong blader and passed that on to her child. Hikaru was then motivated to find strong opponents and get better and better to fulfill her mother's goal, and was introduced taking on the Face Hunters before Benkei convinced her to fight Jinga. Shenanigans ensued, leading her to think Kenta's Jinga, who she beat 8 times in a row and drains him of his Bay points. Then Benkei helps Kenta unlock a new special move to defeat her. She acknowledges his strength and is about to leave when she decides to stay in Metal Bay City for more opponents and eventually runs into Jinga, who only beats her by using the sunlight to beat her clone special move and win. And even though she gets frustrated, Jinga encourages her to have more fun while battling, and from there she actually starts to smile a lot more often. She shows up again during the survival battle arc trying to fight Kiyoya until they get separated, then fights Yu with Benkei and Kenta and gets bodied with them. After the adorable little sandboy announces he wants to do Battle of Bladers as a huge tournament, Hikaru joins the rest in a really fun battle royale before leaving to get all the points. And impromptu points, while I do not like all these arguments between which saga is the best in Beyblade because all 4 generations do something unique, I'm not gonna lie, Metal kinda does the battle royales the best, but that's a video for another point. If you want me to talk about that, let me know in the comments below and I will. During Battle Bladers, she beats a random tournament blader but loses to Kiyoya after getting the proper rematch they always wanted. Then, after a certain point, she later faces off against the ex-ballet dancer Teru and loses. She's later revealed to have enough points to be one of the 16 bladers that can compete in the Battle Bladers tournament, but alongside the rest of Jinga's friends save for Kiyoya, ends up fighting Tsubasa to stall for time so Jinga could get to the tournament, but he returns and she watches him fight Phoenix with the others. Counting Teru, since he's not a jerk, the matchup for Battle Bladers has all 8 of the heroes versus all 8 of the villains, and unfortunately for Hikaru, she's up against Ryuka, the main villain, who ends up blasting her into the stadium walls, traumatizing her so hard that she quit. Like, we knew that she was not going to beat the main villain, but in terms of brutality, this was one of the nastiest ways to go out in terms of careers. And she's stuck in a coma with Ryuga draining her power. Eventually, in the final battle, her spirit alongside Kiyoya and Tsubasa, 2 of Ryuga's opponents he fought afterwards, helps Jinga fight a Ryuga corrupted by the dark power, having her stolen power returned after the battle. She's recovered physically, but mentally, yeah. Seriously, every time I rewatch those episodes, I visualize myself in that scene, and I think, regardless of what the gender of the character is, like, holy crap, that is just terrifying for anyone to go through. At least she survived that, like, thank goodness. So, next season reveals that she was so traumatized, she retires from blading as a career, deciding to become the assistant to Ryo at the WBBA to support continuing the franchise in a different way. I'm not an expert on trauma, but as someone who's had it for different reasons, I guess we can compare it to an anxiety disorder. During Metal Master, she's more gentle than when she started, and her stoic and mature nature actually transitions well, as the assistant to Ryo being more forgetful. To be fair, he was on the run from an evil cult disguised as an organization to manipulate young boys, or as we call it in real life, a scam run by a guy who unironically calls himself an alpha male. But it is funny she actually remembered the rules better than the acting director, while Kenta, Wang Guzhong, and her own damn boss forgot the rules, making the whole battle royale between all of them pointless, hilarious, fun, but pointless. So there's that. But her trauma comes back during the Japan versus Africa match where Tsubasa's dark side traumatizes her, and then Ryuga shows up during the final battle, which leaves her uneasy. Doesn't help the guy responsible is having a weird semi-good guy status while sending his reformed partner to shatter the opposing windows of the mastermind and leaving a light blood mark on their face. But after that, when the United Alliance of Bladers goes to stop Haiti City, she actually uses Storm Aquario alongside you and the others staying behind to hold off some of the security to allow the others time to actually board the fortress. And in Metal Fury, she's there. At least in Shogun Seal, she's still working with Ryo and Kenta around the globe to bring Beyblade back. Was she any better in the manga? From what I could find, she appeared in Chapter 8 in the manga for Battle Bladers, but doesn't speak until Chapter 12, where Tsubasa easily defeats her, and doesn't appear again. Yikes. At least she doesn't fight Ryuga and ends up traumatized. So, what's the problem with Hikaru? I got a few comments wanting me to address this, and I wanted to focus on her character over her gender. But yeah, counting all 16 members of Battle Bladers, adding Phoenix, Doji, Busujima, and Sora, that's about 20 Bladers in Season 1, so Hikaru is the only other girl in the cast besides Madoka at that point. Now, Shonen being a boys' club aside, having her only female character actively involved in playing the sport being used to hype up other characters at worst, giving little battle growth, and then given a PTSD arc that had the potential to flesh her out more but barely bring it up in small doses, isn't necessarily a good look. Like I said before, the Metal Saga used its women effectively enough, but after Hikaru, the other female Bladers in the series, excluding Madoka, were the reserve member of China's team, the likable but someone who felt more part of a duo more than their own character, someone who'd even get a proper battle time until Season 3, a villain in a group without even their own constellation, someone you probably can't even classify as a villain and just had the generic Gasher Blade, and a new generation female Blader that didn't even get a final fight after beating her rival as part of a raid compared to her other male main characters. Yeah, it's not a good look. Madoka's great, and Maru needed more moments to shine on her own, but you can have female characters who are supportive as well as active characters, but you can't just treat one well and neglect the other, which is unfortunately what happened to Hikaru. And what bugs me is that her relationship with her mother is never explored. One of the problems I know people talk about with Hikaru is that her mother never shows up, and there's a debate to be had on whether or not her mother had a positive and negative impact on her life. But the fact that she never shows up again is kind of a sign the writers really didn't care about pursuing this plotline. Even if she doesn't show up, there's really no reflection on Hikaru throughout the series about her mother. Outside of not knowing, we don't even know what her mother did as a Blader. What bugs me is that Pokemon has had two plot lines of their lead girls either trying to embrace or step away from their mother's lifestyle, and yet Beyblade hasn't done that for its lead girls yet. The other characters don't talk about how she looks like a famous Blader from the past, and minor elements could either add to the complexity of the relationship, because the whole debate about whether or not her mother was toxic or not hinders by that fact. We don't really know all that much about the relationship before she fell ill. Because is it really a bad thing for a parent to try and motivate their children to not let themselves get bullied and stand up for themselves to become something great? Or is it the road that some people take to get their kids to that ideal a problem? We need more of that to paint the next picture. Yeah, so she also gets no new special moves and is just stuck with that one special move. Yeah, this is a problem I want to address in a future video. There are times where I feel like there are Beyblade characters that need more than just one special move. And in Season 1, this was really annoying because you have Jinga, Kyoya, Tsubasa, Benkei, and you with 3 to 4 special moves. Meanwhile, you have Kenta and her with only one special move. Trust me, for seasons after the original trilogy, this becomes a problem in later seasons, especially in Metal and Burst, where there are some characters in seasons that don't even have a special move. So you end up with fights where she's fighting Kyoya. He has 4 special moves to her 1 that we've seen at least 3 other characters figure out and exploit. And for how short that battle is, she did well against Kyoya to the point that if he only had 1 special move, she could have won. But again, he had 4 special moves to her 1, and in that match, she only needed 2 to counter her own counter. The girl has the Water Bearer, a constellation associated with both wind and water, and the writers clearly could have given her 1 or 2 more moves. Look at how Mei Mei had at least 3. Yes, I know that's because of her martial arts background, but at least that's something. Also, Hikaru's not with the main crew as much as you remember from Season 1. When you think about who the main characters of Metal Fusion were, you have Jinga, Kyoya, Kenta, Madoka, and Benkei. Then later seasons, you, Tsubasa, Masamune, Ryuga, and Yuki. I guess I would count her as an auxiliary member of Jinga's group, similar to Hyoma and Teru. But when there's a big event, she doesn't go with them, even though it's kind of a shame she doesn't. She was in the city for the first 13 episodes with no indication that she left, so she could have went with them to the Dark Nebula base, she could have went with them to Coma Village, and almost any time we see her before Battle Bladers, it's when she's losing. Now, does Hikaru's fate make sense? I believe a person called Sky of Dust made an analysis on Tumblr that I was thinking about for a while, which I will link since I decided to reread it for this video. And part of what they mentioned was that Hikaru had tried to avoid becoming the same crybaby that when she was younger through her stoic and reserved nature, which I also interpreted as her coping with being bullied and humiliating, causing her to become more reserved and trying to be as strong as she could be, which is why the dark power affected her and Tsubasa more compared to Kyoya. They also brought up the fact that the dark power may have given her a chance to actually find a true passion in life, given that when she was younger, her mother was the one motivating her to do these things. Like I said, if there was a toxic parent analogy, depending on how you interpret it, it could be about her story being their parents forcing their children who lived out their dream through them instead of letting them be themselves. They bring up the fact that when Ryo asks Hikaru if she's sure she doesn't want to battle anymore, she says, "For a moment, I think that's the best thing for me. If I support other bladers that help them increase their confidence, maybe that's enough for now." Which is important because she's talking about what she wants for herself. And while it's not pronounced, they do make an argument that despite the breakdown with the dark power showing up, she is able to recover, culminating in her helping out the other bladers at Hades City. Because in the end, she overcame her fear by getting involved in Beyblade without blading beforehand. And like Madoka, and what Jinga told me Madoka once, you don't need to fight to be a true blader, you just need to have a true blader spirit. To be honest, I actually understand and agree with most of what was said. Like, there is a really good analysis, and I really respect the person who wrote that. Where I disagree is that when you compare it to Tsubasa and Kyoya, those two were still allowed to have their own agency in the story throughout most of it, and either have their own character arcs where they address it by confronting their issues, or playing a bigger role surpassing their previous selves while taking on new challenges. The audience doesn't get to see her overcoming that fear throughout Masters until the end, and even then that leads into the other problem. Because Hikaru makes that choice in the beginning, we don't really see her process, and while we do get to see her becoming more relaxed throughout the season, she's the only one of the three that's never had to worry, confront the dark power herself, or have a story arc throughout Masters focused on them. And the only thing that separates her from them is her gender. Granted, I think there's a way you could still keep her as a blader and have this arc, which I'll touch upon when we get to the end, especially when you remember the previous gen had. The past girls did more in their stories. Like, yeah, Generation 1 wasn't perfect with their female cast, but at least all of them played a role to some degree. Hillary was the audience surrogate for Season 2 and manager. Mal was the emotional core behind the China arc and helped out with Rick's development in Season 3. Emily matured and helped out the heroes in Seasons 1 and 3. Miriam and Selima were sympathetic anti-villains. Queen was Rufus part of the psychic split-up. Matilda was a part of Bartez's cheating plotline. Julia was a leader of her world championship team and was able to beat half of them. And Ming Ming was part of the final boss's team and was able to defeat Daichi. I feel like Hikaru had the makings to be on par with them, but they just didn't give her enough to do. So, what are the fixes I'd make? First off, show off and explore more of her relationship with her and her mother in small flashbacks. If we understood the true nature of their relationship and whether or not her mother was well-meaning or actively trying to inspire her daughter like she did it, would actually provide more insight into whether or not the relationship was toxic or genuine. We also need to see if her mom is still alive, because it would actually be nice to have Hikaru visit her mother at the end of the series, and her mother's just happy that she's doing well. It's actually kind of ironic that in Season 1 she ended up in the hospital just like her mother was, but was able to escape because of the friends that she made. And that's a really interesting contrast. That would be interesting if we learned about what Hikaru's mother was like as a blader. Heck, just have her talk to her mom once or twice, especially in Season 2, so we could see how she reacts to what happened. Also, just give her more special moves and more wins. The only named character she beats is Kenta, but I'm pretty sure she could at least defeat 3 members of the Dark Nebula. I have a few ideas for some special moves she could have had. How about Aquario Tornado, where she creates a tornado that turns her illusions into oceanic projectiles that fly from the air and descend onto your opponents, or Aquario Infinite Shower, where to play on the water bearer being a sign of the air, Aquario flies into the air and drowns the opponent in a rain of attacks before diving down on the opponent. Heck, a move to counter people's ability to predict the infinite assault and weaponize will be perfect, since that's how she lost most of the time. The third, let her join the main crew on some of the adventures. She's around in Season 2, thanks to the fact that she's a secretary. But for Season 1 in particular, it just felt like they didn't want to bring her in when she was clearly available. And considering that she has at least a relationship with 4 out of the 6 main characters, it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to make her the 6th Ranger of the group. Because it's part of her goal that she wants to fight strong bladers. Why wouldn't she want to go to the Dark Nebula with them to fight strong bladers and win? Especially when they go to Koma Village to find Jinga. And adding this before I start recording, but I think as a WBBA secretary, it'd be cool if she'd go around and meet some of the bladers from different teams for more friendly interactions throughout Season 2. Maybe because they're Aquario bladers, and it's crazy they never directly spoke to one another. Sophie because water, and the fact that Sophie's kind of her, but more mature and older. Lyra, because she didn't battle with anyone. Selene, because Selene rivals her former confidence. You know, have that small arc confronting other bladers about whether or not she can overcome that fear of blading to build up to her using Aquario for the first time. Even them helping her launch in a practice run or not. Like, let her talk with Madoka and the other ladies. More female friendships too, damn it! And for a more controversial opinion, make her a legendary blader. Okay, hear me out. I have never liked the fact that with the legendary bladers, the solar system bladers only went up to Saturn despite the fact that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were right there, and they just made those guys the villains when we have water constellation base that would have been perfect for Neptune, like Aquario. Yes, I know Titi was planned to be a female, but Adachi was told by Koro no, because they believe a girl using mainstay products and boys' hobbies generated more sales if it was used more by men. Yeah, because that's what you want your audience of straight young men wants. A sausage fest. Except for the yaoi and gay fans. You all are feasting, but one female legendary was too risky? Wait, holy crap. I'm writing this into the script right now because I just noticed this. None of the metal girls had their own unique constellation bay. Madoka, Mari, and Selene used Gastra, which Tetsuya already used. Hikaru and Meimei used Aquario. Sophie shared Cetus with Whales. Busujima had Scorpio before Lyra made it cool. And Ren's Beyblade is unique to her life. But we already had Phoenix and Karuta's Garuda. Holy crap, I didn't even notice that. What the heck, Takara told me? You had 88 constellations. You couldn't have given me all of them, like at least one unique one that wasn't used? Alright, back to the script. Or that fans just wanted older characters without realizing that most of the legendary bladers were new because the morally gray ones fit the theme of how different people react and clash with being chosen ones. So it'd be best to give it to characters who have unresolved issues or problems like Hikaru or Damien, but that's for another day. But seriously, a good 10% of Beyblade discourse is about which character from the Metal Saga should have been a legendary blader, and almost no one says Hikaru. Like, come on, guys, be serious. I won't get into it too much, but how I would go about her arc after Season 2 is that Hikaru's Beyblade would get hit by the Star Fragment, but to take a cue from Bakugan, she's forced to face a dark power, but based on the healing she's done, she's not quite afraid, but she's not quite willing to fight yet. But gradually it starts to remind her that if she doesn't do anything, it's only going to help Nemesis survive, and it tries to corrupt her like it did with Tsubasa. It's the reason why I said I would want this arc in Season 3 instead of 2, because if Season 2 is about her working through her trauma and getting the right to blade, Season 3 should be about her confronting the trauma that caused it in the first place. Given that the kids that she's working with are around and her mother can see her outside the hospital bed, Hikaru fights it off long enough to challenge it, and it manifests as her mother, similar to what happened in Bakugan when her test manifested as Daisy, even though the real Daisy was fine, challenging Hikaru with a dark Aquario. Hikaru battles a version of her mother, while the real one watches and tries to break the thing that's blocking it free, telling her that she doesn't need to live up to her expectations and that she's doing great as it is. That gets Hikaru to think about all the friends she's made along the way and the children she's promised to protect, and her Storm Aquario evolves into, I'm gonna say, quick bet, Ocean Aquario. Refusing to be afraid of the dark power, defeats a dark power in Dark Aquario and merges with it to get her agency back, and ensures that she'll help stop Nemesis for a bright future for herself, her loved ones, the kids that she's working with, and everyone that she cares about, and participates in the final battle just like the others because she's not going to cower to anyone. Hell, have a moment when joining the legendary bladers against Rago, he summons a dark manifestation of Ryuga Season 1 corrupt form and El Drago, and she shivers, but after everything, she tells Rago and the fake Ryuga, I'm not the same blader now, so don't count on an easy win. I will no longer cower to anyone. Because that's the exact thing she tells Ryuga in their battle in the Metal Masters DS game, which I still own to this day, and she ends up destroying that manifestation. After the show, like usual, like what actually happened, she joins Ryo and Kenta like she did to try and improve their reputation. Her mother's out at hospital, and they are both happy and reconciling with one another. And when she's done supporting bladers and young bladers around the world, she'll be ready to compete for fun, because that's when she wants to. So to conclude, these are all the things I would do with Hikaru's character, because I do genuinely like her. And I just wish she got the plotline she deserved. But yeah, let me know what you think, and if I nailed it, what I got wrong, in your opinion. Remind me to put the links to what I talked about in the description, and I'll make sure my next Beyblade video is a lot more fun.